and we will kick it off. So first, thanks so much for joining, all of you on, and I know we will be recording this and making it available, but I'm really excited to be here this evening and to have this conversation and to be partnered with this amazing group of humans. So thanks for those that are on live. Want to make sure it's interactive, so feel free to ask questions at any point. But to kick it off, I'm going to share a little bit of background on myself and where this conversation is coming from. So tonight, this is a topic that I chose for partnership with the SatSang. And this is a community out of Denver focused around different pillars of, call it enlightenment, personal growth. I actually also have a community here in Denver called ShesIndependent, which we're really focused on, holistic health, mental health, and empowerment. I think, the two communities are really well aligned. And the content that I'm going to be reviewing tonight is really personal. This is content that I really learned and kind of gained perspective around through firsthand organic experience. I am not a professional trained in mental health, so I think that is something important to state. But I really enjoy learning from, observing others and through what I've experienced in this life. And I've also worked with and, spoken with a number of individuals that are trained professionally in a variety of areas around mindfulness and mental health. So the story that I want to tell is I am right now in my mid-30s. At 34, I experienced a sudden loss. And this really, created space for me to realize what did I need to heal and to empower myself and just grow in new directions to get out of that. And so I would say that that's where, kind of the journey had a really big place for further growth and really kind of a standstill to say, what do I want in this life? But I would say the journey really continued as I moved to Colorado and started experiencing others' wisdom and connection. I think the intention behind getting together as a community of humans and, coming together with our shared experiences, it's really a beautiful thing. So I'm really excited to share, some of what I've learned and continue to learn from others. So this tonight is a conversation that is a part of a series that we're running at ShesIndependent. And it's about investing in a healthy mindset and, really just gaining healthy perspective. So the conversations are sometimes led by myself, but more often I'm interviewing or speaking to another person that might have a background in holistic health or in empowerment or in another, niche topic like menstrual cycles. And again, the intention is really to say, how do we dive in and just learn from, other perspectives and other people? The intention is to have a conversation. It's to, share in, this experience, this human experience. Oops. Sorry, my slides just went a little crazy. Give me 1 second. It's to share in this human experience, and it's really to grow. So I'm going to start diving into, some of these slides around, authentic kind of stories as told through me, but I want to make sure it's actionable. I want to make sure it's engaging. So if you're on live, feel free to proverbial raise your hand, feel free to come in the chat. I'm looking at it. Or just speak up. I welcome that if you feel called or you have a question around what I'm speaking to. So I'm going to move into the toughest of times. What does this mean? I mentioned earlier in that slide, but a really big part of my growth journey was experiencing sudden loss through losing my mother to suicide. And that was in early 2019. So it's about 1.5 years in now. Weeks before the pandemic, we additionally lost my 17-year-old cousin to the disease as well. We also had additional death in the last 1.5 years in my family, unrelated to suicide. But listen, it was a lot to go through, a lot to digest, a lot to experience. And I'm happy to chat, suicide loss and what that journey was for me. And I'm not going to go into it too deeply today. I'm going to touch on some topics. But I think it's really important that we are open about these life experiences, the good and the bad. I think it's really important to develop awareness and empathy and, just dig deeper into our lives. So I'm very open to the conversation around mental health and what I've experienced. And I, ask that other people try to be open, even if they're not today, because I personally have found it really does a lot in terms of healing and strengthening our character. So where do I begin with the journey? When I look back at the last year and a half, I really do feel like I've grown tremendously, and I notice it in different ways, and people tell me that. And I want to say that, I had luckily invested in various meditative practices throughout my life and self-awareness over the years. So I learned a lot more going through that darkness, but it was something I had invested in, over the years of my life. And it's what I attribute to getting me through that darkness in a way where I really felt proud the way I was able to honor my mother, speak at her funeral in the toughest of times, be able to be there for myself in ways, and be there in some way, shape, or form, for family members, even though we were going through so much. Perspective and mindfulness, it allowed me to also grow in new ways as I moved beyond that deep darkness of sadness. The self-awareness, the perspective, the coping techniques, it really allowed me to feel peace and feel connection, not only to my mother, but, and this is going to sound a little crazy when I say it, within a week of losing my 17-year-old cousin to suicide, I was already feeling peace and connection. And just saying that is, kind of stuns me, right? Did that actually happen? But it did. And it's really because I started understanding these things and working my brain and, kind of these coping mechanisms. It was almost like a muscle. And I learned so much about, processing and what my brain needed and what my mind needed and what I needed and how to take care of myself. So I want to share some of that, with you today, but I also want to point out that it is a journey, and it's really important to be investing in this type of stuff so that no matter what life throws at you, you can process it and you can handle it. So one of the things that, I like to share, and I guess I already shared a little bit earlier, but having conversations and talking is really great. It's good. It allows us to process things at a deeper level. If you don't address or if you ignore tougher events, that actually can in many ways come back to haunt you or even turn into mental illness. And, in the Western society today, we're not really talking about death and mortality. It's not something that we're really accepting of or, comfortable with, but there is something really beautiful there if we are open to chatting about it. And acceptance of and understanding that cycle and, this dying process kind of uncovers these new ways to live more fully, but also to more respectfully, work with people or treat people that are going through, let's say, they're entering into a death phase of their life. I want to mention briefly the stages of grief. I think this is something that not everybody experiences. However, and I do have a quote up here that basically, if you've not experienced death close to yourself in this pandemic, some of what people have been saying is that this sadness is a form of grief. So giving up or saying goodbye to your old lifestyle, that's basically, you've gone through different stages of grief through this pandemic. Stages are, maybe shock, denial, then finally getting to some form or, some slight form of acceptance, which ultimately sinks more in over time. There's managing. And then there's these, I want to call them a lot more beautiful stages of healing, post-traumatic growth, which is something you always hear about post-traumatic stress, but post-traumatic growth is real if you're open to it. And then this peace and connection, which if you talk to people that have, dealt with loss and have gone through that full journey, and it always is a journey, right? You're never fully healed from it. There really can be this beautiful peace and connection. And I'll get a little bit, more into that in this next slide. So there was a lot of darkness, and I don't want to just say, I grew and we were through it. There was a lot of darkness, and the bouts of depression, it happened as a roller coaster. And again, I'm happy to talk about grief in more detail if anybody would like. But what I want to talk about is that shift and what really happened and what can you look forward to and what can you expect when you're going through and you're processing something really, really tough? And I can't tell you when it's going to happen. It could take many, many months or many, many years. I like to say it's when you're ready for it, when your brain or your body or whatever it is in your life, when you're ready for it, things will start to settle. With my mom, as I said, it took a number of months, but with my cousin, I don't know if it's that I flexed that muscle and that I knew how to navigate it better, but within a week I was feeling peace and connection to him. And it was really unbelievable. But with different forms of, these life events that can be really traumatic, sometimes our brain won't even let us process it, for a period of time because it's protecting us. So I want to say, from the experiences I've gone through and chatted with others, I do think it's something where it's innate within us. What can your brain handle and what can you experience? And everybody has their own, rate of healing and going through something and processing, and that's totally fine. You really can't rush it. But what is that shift? And, what can you expect as you start to wake up and start feeling a little bit better? And connection and presence, with somebody who's passed, it's such a beautiful thing. In nature, especially, I remember I returned back to San Francisco and I looked up at the moon and I just felt my mom, and I couldn't really explain it, but this halo around the moon, it was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. I started seeing dragonflies and, sunflowers, and I started just feeling this kind of energy of her. It was this, peacefulness in feeling her, whether it was she's still living in all of us because we knew her, or that she was actually there with us. There was truly gratitude and there was peace. And there's a lot of signs, that both myself and a lot of family members have experienced. And it really has been a wonderful thing to be open to that. And I think that to feel those signs and to feel the connection, I do think you need to be open to it. But listen, I was not a super spiritual person before this happened. And I really have loved, I guess, that journey and that experience of kind of opening up. Now I want to talk a little bit more about the mind. I say healthy mindset, I say growth mindset, I say work on the tools, and I want to get a little bit more into what that means. The way that I think about it is, you have a few different inputs when you're thinking about how is your mind operating. One of these is context, right? What is happening and how are you framing it? If we look at the pandemic environment as an example, within that context of the pandemic, we have to be accepting that we don't know everything. Right? There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot that we don't know. But what we can do is realize, okay, well, we can be logical and reasonable and we can get information. We can get context. Again, thinking of context, or I guess in this case, maybe it's blending a little bit more into perspective, should we be all worked up? Now, we could look at the death numbers from something like the pandemic, but if you look at it in perspective, there's a lot of other diseases and, killers in this world that are taking a lot more people than this pandemic. I am not saying that the pandemic is not scary, but what I'm saying is have the perspective and try to be logical. Don't go down those rabbit holes of the what ifs and just be afraid of just anything. The other big part here, and this is kind of one of those key concepts of mindfulness, is what's within our control. Because if it's not within our control, you're going to have to let go of it, right? There's nothing that you're going to be able to do. And something I like to bring up here maybe is we all know that we have an inner critic, and there are certain things that we can do to, let's say, get upset, right? We can get upset with ourselves. But when you start to learn that your inner critic might actually be giving you some good advice, or it's telling you something for a reason, and you can actually change that voice so that it's not, you can actually control it in a way where it's not, I'm telling myself awful things, but you can start to listen and you can be open and accepting, and basically you can start to control that situation. And you can't control every situation. So again, I think understanding what is and what is without, or what is not within your control, are really important concepts. So these are some areas, that I like to think about when I'm thinking about how is my mind operating. There are some more concepts, that I'll get into around mindfulness, but those are the ones I wanted to introduce first. So the topic today is, how to grow through anything. how to grow and appreciate the journey. And I think it's clear that we can grow through adversity. Something really tough is thrown at us. Maybe it's unexpected loss or another traumatic event. My life stopped abruptly and I had to take the time. I needed to heal. I transitioned my career and lifestyle that wasn't serving me to one that's now a lot more fulfilling and in line with what I want in life. But listen, what is growing and how do you grow? So for me, it was, realizing that you could appreciate all the things life has to throw at you, or all the things that life can throw at you. And it's realizing that there's good and bad in life. And that in many ways, if you are open to, and if you can process and be open to that darkness, and this is something, by the way, Alex, since you're listening live, and I love that you covered this in your workshop, there's something so beautiful about what are we processing? And this is the human experience. If you just try to think of the nice things, that's not growth. And I'm not saying we want to wallow in the darkness, but realizing that there's so much to life and that life is these adventures and it's the ups and the downs. I mean, it really is a game changer when you start to be open to that. So I guess for me, right, it was growth through adversity. But if you haven't gone through a trauma, and if you're not, in a state where you went through something really difficult, where you can look back and now look, at your kind of life with more gratitude, how might you grow through an event? How might you put yourself in a situation that's, really challenging or something that's very new for you? And I think, part of the reason I put rock climbing on this slide is there are a lot of ways in that you can put yourself in situations that are uncomfortable. You can also grow through learning from and, empathizing with others that have had firsthand experiences. Rock climbing, I think, is a phenomenal sport that teaches us so much about ourselves. It is, clearly a metaphor for whether it's empowerment or growth. It's challenges and obstacles in your face. It's like climbing that wall. It takes extreme concentration, so, mindfulness. And it basically requires failure to measurably improve in that sport. So while you're using your mind-body connection, and while you're, ultra focusing on what do you want to do and what balance do you need with your toes on that rock, it's something that truly is requiring and asking of us to be in this, really focused mental state, and something that really is very healthy for our brains to do. You can call it a flow state. There are a lot of different sports and a lot of different activities that can get you there. But rock climbing, I just think is kind of a fascinating one because it asks of us, you're going to fail to succeed, unless you're free climbing, and we're not going to talk about that. But, listen, a lot of people are living today in an uninterrupted state. I don't think if you're listening today, you're one of those people. And there's nothing wrong with, people that don't want to challenge themselves on a regular basis. But for me, and for I think a lot of you that are participating in this, the ones who've, really inspired me in life, they're learning a lot about themselves. Self-awareness is huge on their list. Growth is huge on their list. Appreciating, all that humanity and life offers and throws at us, following intuition, all of these things, I think truly require that we are open to growth. And those are the kind of individuals that I've always really been impressed with and, have found kind of demonstrate this fulfilling life. And I'm really excited to be on a path where I feel like I'm tapping a lot more into my self-awareness. So that's just a little bit on, kind of growing through adversity, or being in a position to allow yourself to grow, even if not faced with, kind of a trauma or a life event that asks a lot out of you in that given scenario. So I want to chat a little bit more about what is that framework for a healthy mindset. We talked a little bit about concepts and kind of how to think about maybe the brain or how we're thinking, but there are a lot of inputs as it pertains to, really nourishing our mind. And I have worked, by the way, with a nutritional psychologist. I have worked with holistic doctors. So some of this is, information that I've gathered through them, or I've been able to say, oh, wow, I experienced that. Thank you for, kind of signing off and saying that's the case. but just some of those inputs. And I'm sure you're probably aware of some of these, maybe not all, but nutrition, movement, I didn't actually put on this slide, sleep, mindfulness, and we'll get a little bit more into that. These are things that really do contribute to having a healthy brain. And why are we talking about having a healthy brain and nourishing our brain? If I had experienced what I experienced, either with my mom or with one of the other deaths or with my cousin, and I had not been in a great place, I don't know what would have happened. How do you grow from stress and tough life events? And why do some grow whereas others don't? And I really believe a lot of it is mindset. It's, do you have the ability to bounce back or know what you need? What is your state of mental health? I think somebody already, in our community had mentioned, and maybe it was Kevin, but you basically, if you have a still, calm lake or body of water and you throw something into it, you can observe it. But if it's crazy in terms of waves or ripples, what's happening and how do you differentiate what do you need and where is your awareness? So when you're in this state of, health and having a good state of mental health, you're able to know what do you need. You have the awareness to say, what do I need nourishment wise? How do I invest in and when do I need to fill my cup? So if you're experiencing a bout of depression or anxiety for any reason, and we all go through it, we're human, what do you have in your toolkit to get your brain back to being healthy and to feeling grounded and good? Mindfulness, I think, is a term that a lot of people throw out nowadays. The way I like to talk about it or think about it, and something that I learned early on when I'd read a little bit around meditation and theory, was truly spending time in the present. And it's fine to reflect on and grow from things that have happened, but I am somebody that had been prone to anxiety and I guess am prone to anxiety, but you can't worry about what's next or what could happen. Anything could happen. It's not going to be as bad as you're going to play it out in your mind to be. So just that state of living in the present, that's one of my favorite kind of cornerstones of being mindful. I think spirituality and gratitude practices are something that are also massive. They allow us to just slow down and appreciate more of what we're going through in life, tapping into, what do we need and where am I right now? What is my awareness and how aware can I be? Those concepts of accepting the light and the dark and understanding that contrast. These are things that basically are allowing us to process at not only a deeper level, but I think just have more gratitude with anything that life throws at us. The last one on this slide, which is living a meaningful and purposeful life. We'll chat a little bit more about this later, but I can't say enough about what are you doing and, does it make you happy? And so many people are just checking the boxes and saying, oh, I'm going to make money or I'm going to work for this paycheck, but that's not living and that's not meaningful. If you truly think that making more money so that you can pay for something or, get something that you really, want, great. But if you start digging in and really start asking yourself what you want, I'm going to guess it's not super aligned with wealth. So just wanted to mention that. Again, I think that might resonate a little bit with Alex with the workshop you lead. And actually, I should even mention there, I have a background where I used to make a good amount of money and I was increasingly making more money in my career. And I would say, as I have made life decisions to realign myself and say, what do I want to do, where I'm taking pay cuts to do things I want to do more, not only is money more flowing to me because I'm really good at it, but I'm just much happier. So I couldn't say enough about realigning yourself and not leading with a financial foot. So next up, I've dealt with a ton of anxiety and stress given the trauma and the, experiences I've gone through personally. So I am, somebody who's dealt with a lot of stress. I've had a lot of anxiety in my life. I just wanted to mention a few things on this slide around ways to kind of cope or, handle yourself or get through stressful situations. I want to say that it's important that you try different things. One person may love breath work. Somebody else may love CBT, a form of therapy. something I do want to mention is that if you're going through an acute either trauma or you have a very negative thought spiral, something that you just can't get out of the pattern of, one of my new favorites is called tapping, where you can read about it. There's a lot of literature out on it, but basically it's giving yourself, and you could use a machine to do it, or you can just use your hands. You can literally just, if you have your hands, basically, how do I say this? Exerting pressure on opposite sides of your body in a pattern where it's like, left, right, left, right. You can do it on your legs. You can do it anywhere. You can do it on your head. It basically allows you to not go down a negative thought spiral. By the way, if you are experiencing something that's extreme, I would say definitely, check with somebody on the medical side. But I do want to, share some of these techniques because they've been hugely helpful for me. And then, when it comes to ways you can just start feeling better and nourished, if you're, having a bout of stress or anxiety, hot tea, certain teas are actually great at relieving stress. Taking a warm bath, just doing something that slows you down. I mentioned breathing, and some people may like breath work more than others. It's one of my absolute favorite modalities. It's something that, you can really do in a matter of, slowing down in 5 breaths or in a minute. There's really deep practices like conscious breath work, which I think are out of body. If you've not done it, I couldn't, speak highly. I can't say enough good things about it. It really is a wonderful modality. I've really enjoyed things like acupuncture. There's a lot of different ways that you can basically calm down your nervous system. You can chat with friends. Let's say you're in the pandemic and you're freaked out that you're not getting enough social interaction. Talk about it. You shouldn't hold it in. Creation. I got a little bit into painting, over the last few months. It's been really fun for me. I guess calming down with music. There's so many ways. But one of the things, I really do want to highlight is reaching out for support when you need it. That could be a friend, a loved one. It's hard to ask for support, but do it. If you know somebody that's gone through something challenging, it's really difficult a lot of times for somebody dealing with an acute trauma to actually proactively reach out. So if you know of somebody, please reach out to that person, and just being there. And whether it's holding space or just telling them you care. Every time somebody reached out to me when I was going through the trauma, it meant something. And even if it was, wow, in this hour, I got another message. It was just, and I'm not saying like that's the only way, but just if you're thinking of somebody, reach out. If you know they're dealing with somebody, reach out. Dealing with something, reach out. So yeah, listen, there's a long list of tools out there, but those are some of the ones I really like. I will share in the coming slides, we're actually doing a number of virtual nourishment and healing workshops with She's Independent. So happy to have you join, if that's something of interest. All right. And then moving on to, how do we start to shift our mindset? We've talked about different mechanisms for, what can you do and how can you cope? But, what is mindset and how might we start to incorporate some of this into our lives? And, I've said awareness a lot. I can't speak enough to awareness. And as I've tapped in, more deeply into my needs and my goals and, what can I do or when do I need to do something? It really feels like a superpower. We talk about intention and being intentional, but how are you going to be intentional and where does that intention, bring you and how are you going to align it if you don't have awareness? So, I think these are just concepts that are really, really crucial to start to figure out where am I growing or how am I growing and how am I investing in myself or investing in whatever, I want in this life. See what works for you. There are so many different healing and empowerment and, different modalities out there. Somebody may love talk therapy and somebody else may love somatic therapy where you're actually moving your body because your body is storing these tensions. Conscious breath work, it can, kind of bridge the gaps and go to that subconscious level. And it's amazing, but it's not to say that everybody's going to love it. So giving yourself the permission to try things, be open and see, what works for you, is a really, beautiful thing. And when I say see what works for you, I highly and strongly encourage you to say, try it in little bits. Don't try to do and don't expect to be a 180 the next day. I want to be mindful. I'm going to start meditating tomorrow, 20 minutes a day. Not going to work. Maybe ask yourself, oh, why do I want to start meditating? And maybe I'm journaling. Maybe I'm asking and I'm peeling back the layers of that onion to say, what am I trying to get out of this? What is my intention? And maybe I introduce 30 seconds or 2 minutes. But through whether it's meditation or, a gratitude practice otherwise like journaling, or whether it's something like sport, moving our bodies, an hour a week is not going to do as much for you as 10 minutes a day or 5 minutes a day. Having it in there as ritual, as routine, it really is something that makes a big impact. And, the final piece here is the small changes really, really matter. Setting an intention or trying something new, that's huge. So don't feel like, oh, I only did, 2%. That was 2% and you didn't do anything before. That is infinitely better than nothing. So I think that's also, a concept that is worth mentioning. So this is something, I wanted to chat about, which is, I call the slide parallels. Through conversations or with different experts in different niche areas of the mind and body, I have been, kind of fascinated with the understanding that when somebody understands, let's say, the reproductive system, or somebody understands mental health, there are so many parallels between optimizing health and having awareness and basically driving, let's say, awareness practice through gratitude or, a present mindset. There's so many parallels across these different areas of our lives. So to me, it was kind of eye-opening. It was like, wow, journaling doesn't just come into play when it's mindfulness. It's also understanding that if I really want to understand the menstrual cycle and what can I learn about my body, there's a journaling and there's an awareness practice there. So yeah, self-awareness and being open to and really digging deep into, well, what can I learn from this experience and where am I in this experience? It's really this incredible thing when you start digging into, these different facets of our lives. So I guess another thing I would mention there is relationships, which is one of the pillars of this community. And it's really, if you're not appreciating yourself, if you're not sending love to yourself, how are you sending it to others? What are you attracting if you aren't loving yourself? So yeah, just that self-awareness and tapping into where can we further our skills and where do we need to invest, in these different realms. And then finally, I think it's kind of this question of what's your path and where are you on your path and where do you want to be, and digging into the whys behind that. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is to align myself with purpose. And I already had started to take, I would say, inchworm steps, if I can. But then when this happened with my mom, it was a really big change. And I'm a lot more aligned, I would say, with, what I want and being more intentional and being more aware. It's not to say that I advise that people look for a state of, constant gratification. I don't think that's what, alignment is, but you just want to find, what in this life is purposeful for you. You can't just help others. When I started She's Independent, I actually was doing too much for others and my glass was empty and I was just investing in it. And, I realized that no, this is an amazing thing and investing in this community is awesome, but I need to keep investing in myself because if I don't have my health, and if I'm not excited about where this is going, where is it going? It's not going to go anywhere. So yeah, to that point earlier, happiness, I realized for me wasn't wealth creation or finding, let's say, a life partner. It was about deepening gratitude and really love and learning. Would I love to find, potentially find a partner and potentially create more wealth? Sure. But it's not like those things are going to make me happy. I have found that having this alignment, with life and with a bigger purpose, has been something really, really tremendous for me and powerful for me. And I think it's a constant journey because we go through different stages of our lives. So I might argue it's a constant, digging in and asking yourself, what do you want? And how are you going to get there? And what are you going to do? Maybe you want a family, or maybe you want to support a family member. So maybe it's becoming more aware or becoming more empathetic, but really digging in, where do you want to go and how are you going to get there? And mapping it out. And it's, I think that's what life is. And it's kind of this constant state of growth. So I've spoken about, a growth mindset, mental health. I think the investment in our collective mental health is something that we don't talk enough about. So yeah, it's a topic, really near and dear to my heart. Wanted to share, just a quick slide about the She's Independent community. This is something that I'd started following the loss of my mother, as I'd said. We have, virtual healing and empowerment. We're also going to, continue with some offline initiatives when it's safe to kind of come out of this, isolation that we're currently facing. But a lot of it is currently donation-based still. Would love, to see some more faces there. All are welcome. I would say some events might be people who identify as women, but for the most part, most of the events are open to any gender. So that was kind of the overview of what I wanted to cover. And, I'm very open to questions. I did mention conscious breath work, and we're doing a workshop tomorrow on that. We're doing a more introductory breath work on Friday. We call it essential breath work. So if you have any interest in that, feel free to check it out. But that's what I, wanted to cover in this session. So thanks so much for, listening in. If you have any questions, happy to address them live. Also happy if you want to send me a private message. As I said, I'm an open book and really looking forward to more conversation. And it looks like Alex said he had to step out. Thank you, Alex, for joining. Appreciate you as well. No worries if y'all don't have any questions, but hi, Marcus.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah.
I don't have a question. I guess I can relate a lot to what you're saying, of course. So I just want to reiterate how powerful some of your slides were and how you expressed it. What I would like is for you to just first chill out a little bit, just take a breath, kind of like I'm your homie.
I appreciate that.
And someone like me, I'm cooking dinner right now. That's why I had to do the thing off. And I have a bunch of good news. But I didn't have tragedy. I didn't have what you had. But what I had is a real, I call it a real trial and tribulation.
Yeah.
It started in 2010. And I also share a lot of, it calloused my mind. Are you familiar with David Goggins?
I'm not.
So I calloused my mind, but it sounds like you've calloused everything. You calloused your mind, your heart, your soul. And that's what's made you become what you've become right now. So I want you to be a little bit more personal with me. Like I said, we're homies, because your slides are so educational and you did very well. But now kind of share with me how I'm saying that, how I'm asking you that. You've calloused everything within you now.
Well, I think that word is I wouldn't necessarily say that that's a word I identify with. And I appreciate your perspective. I think I probably come off as, I don't want to say more professional, but I probably come off as less casual because I have a background that stemmed from the corporate world. And I do lead webinars for my business. So I think the way I come off might be partially because of that. I would say that in many ways, I've actually grown a ton in terms of my empathy and my awareness of being able to relate to others and connect on a more emotional level than prior to this experience because of what I've gone through. I would say the one way that I would say I've calloused myself to be very open and very vulnerable, because I love being open, is relationships with partners, potential partners in life. That's an area I could definitely use work. But I actually feel pretty good about, and I've made a ton of investment, and I love the network I have of friends and family members. And, I wouldn't look at it as calloused in that I was able to get through this. I really look at it as I was able to process and be there for myself and nourish and heal. But I don't think that that's the right, word.
All right. We'll expand on that. And I know that we're going to connect here soon.
Yeah.
I guess what the calloused part for me means like, what are you going to do if this happens again and you go through something similar?
Well, I did with my cousin. And I can share, I went through it with my mom a year and a half ago.
Okay.
And I started, after I took a bunch of time off to myself, and I started investing in and working on things, not only healing for myself, but I started investing in and doing some things that also collectively were helping others. When it happened with my cousin, because we lost him, as I said, to suicide, that experience was one where I then built and had a bunch of these coping skills where the awareness and being able to nourish my mind and body in ways, I'd learned so much about healing that it was like, I felt strong, but peaceful and connected to him in a really beautiful and spiritual way.
Awesome. Okay. I need something. What happens next for you and I is because, through my trial and tribulation, and you could just you could end on this with me, is I didn't do the emotional piece.
Yeah.
I actually thought that people would be there for me, and there was nobody there for me.
Yeah.
A couple people, obviously, like my close mom and dad and stuff, but.
Yeah. And listen, like, I mean, I can't say enough about community, and community. And that's why I started investing in and building this social impact community at She's Independent. I can't say enough about how important that was. And that was basically a lot of what got me through the initial, let's say, minutes, hours, days, because it wasn't about weeks and months. It was holy shit, seconds and minutes. And friends were sitting on the couch with me and crying with me. My cousins were like processing the funeral shit, and they're like, pay us back. So I don't have that experience, but I do know how important the community was from the perspective of I was living it. Now I'm single, and when I did come home and I did have time to myself and I didn't have other people there, I had to be there for myself. But yeah, I'm happy to chat with you deeper, and I can't say enough about how important it is to be there for others. And that's why I said that whole, if you know somebody going through something, or if you need help, ask for it, or just reach out to people,
Awesome. That's obviously our numbers are on the group text, so I'll make sure to send you mine. I would love to have you share a little bit more on that piece on a phone call or whatever, please.
Well, thank you for saying something.
Of course. It was everything was great. I enjoyed everything. I had it on my TV, so I had to mute this because I do the shared screening.
Yeah.
So I was just looking at your slides, cooking dinner, listening to you, and then.
You make anything good?
You want to see?
Yeah.
No, I'll send it to you separate. I'll let this happen.
Separate. All right. Bye, Marcos.
Thank you, Natalie. Bye-bye.
All right. So I don't think we have any more questions, so I'm happy to close it out. Thank you again, and really looking forward to continuing the conversation.